Welcome to De-Stress Your Business, the podcast where we help you get incredible results in your business without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at AirManual. Now, in this episode, it's a mini episode as part of a hiatus over the summer that I'm taking so that I can be off with my family in a motorhome, traveling across Europe, staying in vineyards and farms and canoeing and doing all those great things. And I say all of this not to make you feel bad, like particularly if you're working right now, but to make you think about where you could be. Because I have been doing a research project recently, and one of the questions I've been asking is, if you could take 6 weeks out of your business without having to work, what would you do instead? And do you know the most common answer that I get is some form of traveling. And I even ask where that would be. Where would you travel to? And in many cases, people haven't thought about it. But in other cases, people suggest maybe Disneyland has been one that's been highlighted. Going off to Bali and around sort of island hopping. We've had examples of traveling across Europe, including quite a few saying motorhoming, which is something I've come early to. Like given my age, I'm perhaps older than I look, or I look older than I am. I'm not sure which way around it is. Please don't put that in the comments. I don't need feedback on how I look versus my age. But I know that sometimes people are surprised it's a younger person in motorhome, and my wife, for her, it's a big dream, and so it's something that we're doing. And I know that for a lot of people, that's something they'd like to do too, is travel across Europe and do that. Or maybe it's across the US. There's lots of amazing places that you can go. So I know for a lot of people, it's about travel. And you know, if you've been listening to enough of these episodes, you know how strongly I feel about building a business that doesn't depend on you. That means that you and your team, actually not just depend on you, doesn't depend on anyone in your business, that you can build a business that people can go and do the things that they love most with the people that they love most. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. But in this episode, that's not what this is about. This episode is all about a question that I was asked, or a summary of a number of questions. So thank you very much. If you've asked a question, thank you so much for doing so. Really, really appreciate it. We should do shout outs. I should have a list of people that have asked this, but I haven't got that. So apologies. I'm packing, right? Like I'll pass to it once we get back. But the question I was asked is, when should I capture the process? When should I create the structure? And particularly, should I do it at the time? Should I do it before? Should I do it after? And that's a tricky thing. And so that's what I'm going to cover in this mini episode. The first thing that I want to tackle is when it can be too soon to capture a process. In my experience, it's rare that anyone faces this, but it's useful to understand this so that we can look at when is the right time. Now, the wrong time that's too early is when you don't know what you should be doing at all. So for example, let's say that we're going to do a new form of marketing that we've never done before. And the wrong thing to do as part of that would be that we document a really strict process and how to do it, and then we hand that over to someone and go, right, off you go. Particularly if we don't have any feedback loop to make sure that we improve that. And the reason that that's wrong is because although it might be very efficient and we can get someone doing it, the problem is we haven't tested it really. We haven't had feedback along the way. And so we don't know whether it'll work. And so we might set that person off for weeks, months, or even years doing something that eventually doesn't even give us any benefit. And so if we're going to create a business that is impactful and does great things, we need to make sure that we at least have some idea that the things that we're doing are the right ones before we make them efficient. Now, that's not to say that if you're embarking on something new, for example, having a sales conversation with a particular new market segment, that's not to say that you can't document that beforehand to plan what you're going to do. Like, that's a useful exercise, but we've got to be careful about then handing that over before it's ready. And so typically when I'm building a new business, working on a new segment with a new product, whatever it is, I will come up with what's the questions that I want to ask, what's the flow that I'm going to go through, often based on either businesses and products and so on, and sales processes that have worked for me in the past, or best practice templates like the ones that we've kind of built for our clients at AirManual. But essentially I've got a starting point to help me ask these questions. Now, the key is that I'm going to ask the questions and see what the result is and see if that helps in that conversation. And if it is, great. But if it isn't helping me, then I'll change it or remove it. And over time, through iteration, I'll get to the point where I've got, in this example, a sales conversation checklist that reliably gets me information that allows me to make a decision whether they're a good fit for me, and equally that I've imparted information through that conversation that gives them an opportunity to solve for a good fit. And if we are, that we're both enthusiastic about that, and that I can be super clear on how they can work with us going forward, and that there's a clear set of actions that they can take if that's the right fit. Once I get to that point, I've then got a well-documented process that I hand to someone else. Now, what you can see that's kind of the ideal, is that you're documenting it as you do it. You're doing it to improve the process. Like if you've got salespeople currently that are having sales conversations all in different inconsistent ways, you don't know what works. Well, if you hire someone else in, you don't know how to train them up so that they're doing a good job. A good starting point is, okay, let's document how you're currently doing this, and take your best salesperson. How are they currently doing this? And then you can iterate it over time to make it really good. Now that is directly different to an attitude that I see is really common when it comes to documenting processes and putting in that structure, which is to treat it as homework, something you do after you've fixed the problem. So using that sales example, I've just said that what you should be doing is documenting it, based on what they're currently doing and as you're improving it and so on. Whereas the wrong attitude would be to say, okay, well, first, let me get all of my salespeople consistently following the right process, an improved process, and then let's document it afterwards. Now, the reason that's wrong is, firstly, it's going to be hard to get everyone consistent if at no point have you documented the process. How are they going to even know what your expectations are? So that becomes slower. Secondly, why would you document something to solve a problem that doesn't exist? You've documented, if you have managed to get your team working consistently and get great performance, why would you then document it now? You've already solved that problem. You've probably got a new problem. Like maybe the issue is you need more leads, or maybe you're selling so much you need to sort out client servicing or whatever. You're not going to document that. That's not the problem anymore. And so that's not going to be a time that you do it. And so you'll move on to something else, and you'll only wish you had documented it when sales becomes a problem again, when 3 of your 5 salespeople happen to leave, and now you've got to train other people, and you realize you haven't got any processes documented, and the 2 salespeople are having to cover 5 people's worth of leads, so they're too busy to train them. And then you'll feel the pain. But how would you prioritize that? Like back when you perhaps had bandwidth to do so, it wasn't a big problem. So the way that we overcome this, rather than just try and force you to have the discipline to go, oh, well, document it, make hay while the sun shines, document it while you had the chance. Instead, we found that it's far better to say, solve the problem by documenting it, right? So if your biggest problem right now is that too much of the business depends on you, solve that by documenting it. Capture what you're currently doing, brain dump it into a series of steps, get that handed over to someone else. Now you've solved the problem and you've documented it as you went along. So that's the key to this, is not treating it as homework, but equally not documenting and handing over a process without knowing whether it works. You can absolutely create a draft of a process and then iterate on it, improve it until you know it works. Once it works, then you can hand it over. Don't then put yourself in a position where you have to document it afterwards. And if you do, you're probably having to do it as part of maybe onboarding new staff members, in which case, don't make the mistake of saying, well, I'll train them and onboard the new staff members, and then I'll document how we onboarded them and how we trained them. Instead, just get even the bare bones of what that training and onboarding should look like, and use that as part of that process of bringing that person in. Because even if it's got some gaps, it'll be a better starting point, and you can populate those gaps as you go along, or even better, get the new team member to do so. And that's far more effective, better use of your time. You're focused on getting the impact rather than treating process documentation and creating the structure in your business as a homework exercise that you won't prioritize and then will wish that you did when there's a problem later. So there you go. So that's the answer to when should you document your processes. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please let me know. Please Get on Apple, give us a 5-star review rating if you've been enjoying this and other episodes from the De-Stress Your Business podcast. If there's feedback that you've got for us or suggestions you've got for future topics or other questions that you'd like to ask, then ping me a message on LinkedIn or email alexis.kingsbury@airmanual.co. But otherwise, until next time, have fun.